Hello everyone and welcome to a really awesome game from round 6 of the 2020 Tata Steel Masters edition. It's Daniil Dubov versus Vladislav Artemiev, and we've already covered a game that Artemiev lost to Alireza Firouzja. I hope I pronounced it correctly this time, as some of you sent me the way to pronounce it. It's Firouzja, so pronouncing both the Z and the J. So thank you for that. Yeah, he already lost a game to Firouzja playing that variation of the Caro-Kann. And now he will employ the same variation against Dubov. So let's see how that works out. Dubov opens with e4. We have c6, the Caro-Kann defense, d4, d5, and e5, the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann. Bishop to f5, developing the light square bishop before closing the cage, and then now h4. Dubov goes for the Tal variation, the same as Firouzja did. So h5 and then now c4. So everything the same as in that game. e6, knight to c3, and here Artemiev went knight to e7 against Firouzja, but here he goes bishop to e7, saying that okay, I'm pretty sure you've checked the game I played against Firouzja, so let's just deviate here. Dubov continues c captures on d5, c captures on d5, and now bishop to d3, offering a trade of light square bishops. The bishop captures, we have queen captures, and now knight to c6. Continuing development, we have knight to f3 and now knight to h6, which is often the way you want to go when white has the advanced e-pawn, preventing normal development of your knight, so pushing the h-pawn makes sense when developing this knight this way. But Dubov decides to give up the dark square bishop to prevent the knight from jumping over to f5. The knight would be a really strong piece on f5 since the h-pawn prevents g4, so you will not be able to kick away the knight from there. And there will be a lot of pressure towards the d4 pawn. So bishop captures on h6, we have rook captures on h6, and now there is one game in the database where g3 was played, but here Dubov goes for rook to c1, and it is as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. Artemiev continues king to f8. He wants to play g6, bring the king over to g7, and then bring the rook back to h8 and bring the rook into the game this way. So this is the way he will now castle artificially. g3 by Dubov. We have g6, continuing with the plan. We have castles and the king to g7. And now knight to a4. Dubov wants to grab hold of the c5 square, and you cannot prevent the knight since the knight would hang. So we have rook to h8, and now knight to c5. Of course, Artemiev captures the knight. It's a very strong piece. So bishop captures, we have rook captures on c5, and now queen to d7, developing the queen, preparing for the rook to enter the game. We have rook f to c1, now nicely doubling up on the c file, and rook h to c8. So the rook is now into the game, and the artificial castling has been completed. And here we have queen to c3, and there was a lot of questions in the chat whether this is the Alyekhin's gun, the weapon that Alekhin used in his game against Aron Nimzovich in 1930, and it should not be the Alyekhin's gun. So Alyekhin's gun if it's a queen rook battery. So if the rook was here, regardless of the fact that it would be captured, but this is Alyekhin's gun. So this rook queen rook sandwich is not Alyekhin's gun. Or maybe it is. Maybe someone decided that any battery, including two rooks and the queen, is Alyekhin's gun. But in the original, it's actually queen, rook, rook. So we have a5, now preventing b4. So a3, Dubov prepares b4, and now a4. Now if you play it, then just a captures on b3 en passant, and here knight to e1. And from e1, the knight can go to some very attractive squares. You can go to g2 followed by e3. You can go to f4. You can go to back to f3 and then to g5. You can go to d3 to b4. So a lot of very interesting options for the white knight. And here, the problem for black is you kind of don't want to have all this pressure along the c file. The problem is you cannot trade with knight to e7 because of rook to c7, and you're just going to give white a lot of activity. So if you trade, white just gets the queen all the way up there, and then if trades, then the other rook takes their place. And if you move the queen d8, then white can just continue his plan, bringing the knight into the game, and the black is basically without a move. So after this knight to e1 move, we have queen to e7. awaiting moves, waiting to see what Dubov will do. And here Dubov goes back, knight to f3, and he decides to go for a different plan. His plan is now he's going to put the knight to g5, and the knight will be an excellent piece there. You cannot kick it away. There is no h-pawn. The h-pawn is already advanced. If you push this, then you just open up the position. So he wants to bring the knight to g5. He wants to move the queen, maybe bring it to f4 at some point and put pressure on f7. And also he's considering a nice rook lift, rook to c3 followed by rook to f3 to put even more pressure on the f7 pawn. So queen to d7, Artemiev just waits, and now king to g2, improving the position of the king. Artemiev already announced that he will just wait and see what happens. We have rook to c7, preparing to double rooks on the c file. Maybe then it will be easier to trade it off. And now queen back to c2, not allowing this rook to enter the game because the pawn on a4 would hang. So queen back to d8. And now queen to d1, still keeping an eye on the pawn here while making it a possibility for rook to c3 followed by rook to f3 for this very nice rook lift. So here we have rook to d7 and now knight to g5. And the knight cannot be kicked away from there. It's just a beautiful piece. So what do you play here? Well, you could just wait and see what happens with something like rook to c7. But then, like we said, the plan is to bring the rook to c3 to f3, pressure f7, bring the queen to d3 to to d2 to f4, and then also you will have rook, queen, and knight all piling up on f7. One of the ideas. So here, while you could wait for that to happen, Artemiev goes for a more active approach. He plays rook to a6. Probably rook b6 to b3 is an idea to not only activate the rook but also to counter White's rook influence along the third rank. And here Dubov goes for a Capablanca move, I would say. Capablanca always played a g4 in any position, you name it. So here g4. Now everything is paralyzed on the queen side. The center cannot move, and here he wants to bust open the king side. So if you capture, of course, queen captures, h5 is coming. It's just a very hard position to play for black. So here instead queen to h8 by Artemiev, and now queen to f3, putting pressure on f7. Okay, for the moment it's protected, but also queen to f6 could be dangerous in some variations. So here rook to b6, and this is a bit too much for Artemiev, as he wants to bring the rook over to b3, but it seems just a bit too dangerous, allowing rook to a5, because then queen f6 check is coming. You're gonna have a lot of problems here if you allow rook to a5 to a8. But you have to play something. So better than rook to b6 was just a waiting move, or just bring the rook back, rook to a8. But then you just have to admit that your previous plan wasn't really great. Now there is a saying that says a bad plan is better than no plan at all. This is an exception here. No plan is better than this plan. It's better to just bring the rook back. So here, if queen to f6 check, you can just bring the king back, and yes, it's very passive. But after queen to f4, white doesn't have a threat. So the game continues, and perhaps black will find a new way. But like I said, Artemiev went for rook to b6, and now we have g captures on h5. You could have gone for rook to a5 right away. It puts pressure on the a4 pawn, but Dubov says, okay, there's time for that. So g captures on h5. Queen captures on h5, and now queen to f6 with check. We have king. If you go to h6, then knight can capture on f7, very unpleasant. So king to g8, not allowing ideas like that, and now rook to a5. And now there's a problem. How do you prevent rook to a8 check? You cannot go rook to d8. So one way you could do it, rook to d8 is impossible because of queen captures on f7. But you could play rook to a6, but that's just bad. That just, you just capture, and you win the knight here. So that just loses. So after a rook to a5, we have queen to g4 check, king to f1, and now, like I said, you could try this and hope that there is some sort of a perpetual, let's say captures, and then, okay, you do get queen d1 check, king g2, you can go back, queen g4 check, king h2, queen captures on h4 check. Unfortunately for black, knight to h3 is here, and all of the squares are covered. Also, the queen trade is hanging, so you don't really have a good move here. You still can't block d8. Rook c8 check followed by rook to h8 mate is coming after the king moves to h7. So here you would have to trade queens, but this is a pointless endgame to play. Of course, white would be completely winning here. So instead, Artemiev tried knight to d8, but still it doesn't work. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the finishing move Dubov played while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding such a nice move, and it is in fact the only winning move. So feel good about yourself if you found it. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, still it's rook to a8, as the knight is threatened on d8. There's no defense against rook captures on d8, and that's just it. So whatever you play doesn't really matter. You have to make a move, although there are no good moves like rook b3 is instant mate, check captures, and then just captures on f7 followed by queen to h7 mate. And if you try something like queen to f5 to try and trade queens, still just rook captures here, rook captures, queen captures, king moves, and now you can either just capture yet another rook, or you can go rook here, and now there's no defense against mate. So there's also that. But yeah, after rook to a8, of course, Vladislav Artemiev resigned the game, and an excellent victory for Daniil Dubov, who repeated the line Firouzja played against Artemiev, and it will be interesting to see if Artemiev will try to employ it one more time in this tournament. I'm pretty sure he will, but if he enjoys it, it does bring a lot of play for both sides, so the games are interesting, so I welcome that. It's but if he feels he wants to fight, then he should fight. And I've also prepared the standings after round 6, so here they are. Wesley So and Alireza Firouzja still in the lead with 4 out of 6, followed by 3.5 pointers Fabiano Caruana, Jordan Van Forest, and Daniil Dubov now after achieving this victory. With 3 points, Jeffrey Shiong, Magnus Carlsen, Young Krzysztof Duda, Vishwanathan Anand, Anish Giri, and Vladislav Artemiev. Duda and Carlsen still doing the Giri out of 6 games, all 6 games drawn, while Giri himself only 4 draws and 1 loss and 1 win. Followed by Nikita Vityugov, Yu Yang-gi, and with 1 point, still with 1 point, Vladislav Kovalev, last year's winner of the Challengers edition. He can't seem to catch a break. But yeah, that's, chess is ruthless. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Martin Moore, Scott Sterry, Christelle Day, GWL, and Kevin Hune for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Tata Steel. We still have at least 1 more game to cover from the Women's World Chess Championship, and of course checking up on your wonderful suggestion. And when there's a rest day and when I manage more time, we are continuing the Morphy saga as well. So yeah, thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.